With the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, and that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and thereby we will be able to sanctify His name, and God help, inshallah, bring peace to the world. Amen. It is a great honor and a privilege to be sitting here. I'm very humbled. I thank God. I've been here a few years ago, and that God gave me life. He should continue. I should have long and healthy years amongst, and all of you should have long and healthy years. God should help. It is really an honor, a privilege to be returning. There's so many people to thank. I was just asking, and I had the pleasure and the honor of personally meeting His Excellency, the Ambassador of Palestine. We had some very, very interesting conversations, and I had of course, the club here that accepted me and gave me the opportunity to speak. I really don't know how to express my thanks. And again, I would mangle names, but I know that his name, I hope, is Maurice. I really hope that I'm pronouncing right. I've called Nicole. This is an organization that we have been working together. The Chilean Solidarity Committee with Palestine. We've been meeting in many, many different places throughout the world. Nicole is from the first Palestinian, I think, left Palestine in 1948. Yeah. Right? I mean, His Excellency, the Ambassador, was maybe one of the first children that was born as a refugee child out of Palestine. In his mother's womb, he left Palestine. I know that I'm going to do injustice to so many of you who are so kind to me here, but the Federation of Palestine, I thank you very much for helping, and all of you for giving of your precious time. Every person, time is precious, and you have so much to do. For coming, I thank you, and with God's help, inshallah, we hope that it will be worthy of your time being here. The issue that we are speaking about is really crucial, it's critical, it is worthy of really giving thought, not just accepting what the mantras, what the narratives that you hear on the street, the narratives that is being actually put on a platter and given to the human beings today is malicious, it is vicious, it is criminal, and it has caused death and suffering. And really, God created all us human beings, and He wants us to live in peace and harmony. And what we have been hearing for the last, well over the existence of the state, the 68 years, we have become, instead of brothers and sisters, a rift has been driven between us because, I think, we say it's the works of the Satan, of Shaitan, but it has, in material aspects, it's been driven by the news, by the narratives that you've heard. The distinguished men and women here from the older generation, I'm sure, has each one the anecdotes and the narratives of how we, as Jewish people, and you as Arab people, different cultures, Arab Christians, and then the Arab Muslim community, that we all lived together for hundreds and hundreds of years. Personal anecdotes, how we did favors for each other, helped each other in life and death circumstances. And there is many narratives, and I have much to tell. It would be so interesting, but time is short, and it's very unfortunate. I urge anybody who would like to compile and bring narratives, advertise around the world. People should tell their narratives of our coexistence. It's critical that this should be publicized and should be recorded. People get older. We don't realize that time goes past, And people, all of a sudden, we yearn to hear the stories of our parents. We urge everybody to go to your parents, ask your family history, ask many things, but also ask about the coexistence, how we live together in peace and harmony. This is really something that is critical, because it will, when a doctor wants to find out what to prescribe for a patient, he starts asking, what symptoms do you have? What's bothering you? And in that manner, he comes to the conclusion of what the sickness is, what to search for at least. By the narrative that we have around the world, there's one thing. There's a religious hate, an ingrained hate from Muslims to Jews, Jews to Muslims, Muslims to Arabs as a generality, Muslims to Christians, Christians to Muslims, and Arabs as a generality to Jewish people. And we are to fear them. Jews went through Hitler went through the Holocaust. Now, today, the Nazis were eradicated, sort of, but there's the Arabs that continue with this. That's a given. That is what the narrative, that is what you'll find in the majority of publications, in children grow up with this. Children, mind you, who are living in homes where their parents are refugees, parents who are the leftovers from large families who escaped from Europe. Children who can tell you stories of how their parents miraculously remained alive and how viciously their neighbors in Ukraine, in Poland, in Hungary, how they were viciously murdered, and people who they had given their trust to turned on them, people who had favors from their parents, and they turned on them, things that's unbelievable. And they tell them, you see the Arabs, this is what you're seeing today, so be careful, be careful. This is part of the Nakba, this is a part of the tragedy, this is part of this terrible crime against the Almighty. The Almighty created us. The Almighty wanted us to live. His name, one of the names of God is Shalom, is peace, Salom. God wants us to live in peace, and we have been living in peace. And there's an interloper, there's a strange movement, a foreign movement that came along in the last 100-odd years, and all of a sudden, this new narrative came about. This hate started growing and developing, and the proof is there. Stand back, look at history. Where did the Jews flourish? Where did the Jews produce great scholars, great leaders, beautiful communities? Was it not in Iraq, in Iran, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt, and in Palestine? And who was living in Palestine? How many Jews were living in Palestine? And how many Christians and how many Muslims? The Jewish community was the smallest of these three, and yet all three coexisted. They lived together, they lived in peace and harmony. My colleague, Rabbi Rosenberg, his grandparents left because they didn't want to be under this. When the Six-Day War, there was an intoxication of euphoria, of victory. They left, they were afraid that their children will not, God forbid, nobody's guaranteed with their children, they were afraid that they may be caught up in this. So as his grandparents, as tens of thousands of other Jews left, not knowing another language, they were lawyers, they didn't have a field to have an income, yet they picked themselves up. His grandparents left with 5 children. Both his parents were born in the Holy Land. They were 8 generations Palestinian. I've heard from his grandparents they should live long and happy years to 120. They're in their 80s. I've heard from them and from many other older Jews from Palestine how they lived together, babysat each other's children. So many different anecdotes again, but I picked babysitting children because that is the most precious possession of a person, is his child. And yet they entrusted their children to be babysat by their Arab neighbors. What could be said more than that? Now we have this issue that it is a given that we have an ingrained hate. So we are responsible as a Jew, and the chief rabbis of Palestine stated this. Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was the chief rabbi till 30-odd years ago, he passed away. He himself moved out of Palestine and remained with the title. There is a town called Kiryas Yoel, KJ we call it, in upstate New York, that was created. It's only, the whole town is maybe 30,000 Jews, more. Thank God, God should protect them. And it's all an anti-Zionist town. He moved, remaining as chief rabbi of Palestine, and he urged Jews who are capable, it's very hard to uproot oneself, he urged them, leave, don't be under the Zionist occupation. He himself has many schools. Till today, there are hundreds of thousands of students living in the Holy Land, students of the chief rabbi of Palestine. But he urged his students, he said, stand up. We are required and obligated to inform the world, to let them hear that our name has been hijacked, our identity has been stolen. This is a desecration of godliness. We come along and say we made a godly covenant. We made a covenant to be a king, Mamlechas Kohanim, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, to serve God, to emulate God, to be a light onto the nations, meaning that people should see ideally how a person is serving God and learn from that. I have to mention that we do not search to convert people to Judaism. We believe, as the prophet Elijah, in his book Tana Devei Eliyahu, and Maimonides writes in his writing that one, to serve God, you don't have to be Jewish. As you're keeping the 7 commandments of Noah, to believe in one God, not to serve idol, not to kill, steal, commit adultery, to have a court system in every land. If you keep 7 commandments of Noah, then you will, with God, then you will inherit the world to come. And it would never, between Jews and their non-Jewish brethren and sisters, was never an issue, the difference of the religion. We respect, and we ought to respect them, and God will give them the world, they will inherit the world to come. This was the coexistence of the people around the world. But God told us that we have to emulate, and we have to keep, we are responsible in our actions, being that we are a nation of priests, that we're constantly studying His Torah, that if people sees our actions and it's not up to par, then it's a desecration of God's name. Zionism is coming and using the Jewish religion, and they are smearing the name of holiness of God. They are smearing the name of our religion in their existence and what they're doing. So we are obligated to stand up and speak. It is very hard. Many of my Jewish brethren are beaten. Our rabbis have been assassinated. This Rabbi Teitelbaum, they tried to assassinate him, and thank God, God protected him. The one of our representative in the Turei Karta with President Arafat, he lived in Jerusalem, and they poured acid in his face. He was blind in one eye, and he was barely able to see from his other eye. And this, I could go on and on with stories like that. So people are afraid to speak up. But the chief rabbi of Palestine pleaded with us that we should go out and speak. He himself went out to speak. So that is what, with God's help, I'm here. I will try to very concisely just give an overview what the difference between Judaism and Zionism, because you have all over the world, and even here in Chile, I was informed that that one of the members of parliament who I bumped into in the hall, I didn't bump hard, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong, please don't accuse me. But we passed them in the hall. And this member of parliament, I was informed by Nicole, said that it's a crime to differentiate between Judaism and Zionism. So we are here to let you know that these are thieves. They're using the Jewish name. The Zionists have stolen our name. They've hijacked my identity card. They have no right to use my name, Judaism. Judaism is subservience to God. It's a covenant we made with God on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago to uphold, to be subservient to Him, and to keep the laws of His Torah. We've been doing this for 3,000 years. 100-odd years ago, in that long span is quite a short a relatively short time. 100-odd years ago, a movement of non-religious Jews, Theodor Herzl, Ben Gurion, Chaim Weizmann, Zev Jabotinsky, they came along and they detested the religion. In their personal lives, they didn't practice it, and they wrote a lot about their anti-religious feelings, openly, blatantly. And maybe with God's help, I'll just say a sentence or two from each one of these individuals. But they came along, and they were searching for convenience, for something that, what were they searching for? We believe again that the Shatan, the Satan, was driving them, because they should have assimilated, like their parents did. They came from children of the Reform, mostly from Reform Judaism, which is around 250 years ago, which means to reform the Judaism. It's ridiculous. If somebody wants to come along and say, oh, they're going to reform, there's an atheist who will become the Pope or something, because he speaks well, because he has other good plans. He's a very efficient, he's a linguistic, he's an economist, he's a scientist. You'll say, that's crazy. Somebody's coming along, and they because they want a convenient life with a homeland, therefore they're using the name Judaism for their ideology, for their issue. That is what Zionism is. Zionism came 100-odd years ago with an ersatz Judaism, a transformation from subservience to God to a political nationalist movement, a material issue of having a piece of land, an Olympic team that's going to win gold medals, that they can say we have Nobel Prize winners, and we're not in any manner a third world country. We are with the top. We are with the best. They go along speaking how great they are. That is what our Judaism is, that we should be somehow better than the other, that we should be able to brag about what we've gained in materialistic gains, that we should be able to, in some manner, have a piece of land, and ignoring, of course, and ignoring all what God commanded us of being compassionate to others and so forth. This is not Judaism. They've taken an atheist pope. That is what they've done. They've stolen my religion. They've taken a movement, and they needed something to give it legitimacy, that they should have backing from the Christians, from the world, in the United Nations. They can't just say, people ask, look, you have a movement, it's 68 years, you're having, every 10 years you have a major war, 48, 56, 67, the Intifada 1, Intifada 2. How much are you going to keep on trying to make this ideology of yours? Drop it. Jews were living there together with people, with the Muslims, with the Christians together. Why should we keep on pushing it? You're trying to drive a square into a round hole. Why? So the way they came along with a simple excuse, this is not a new thing. We are this godly given religion that you believe in, that you respect. It's the Bible. God gave us the land. It's ours. How dare you start up with God? And people get intimidated. Yeah, I don't want. I bought stocks yesterday. I don't want it to fall. So they don't want to start up with this issue. So they're using the Judaism, the religion, as a facade, a window dressing, for a simple, materialistic, flawed political movement. Nothing that has to do with religion. Again, it's in essence, Zionism was a movement, an ideology. To have a piece of land, they wanted to make it in Patagonia, in Uganda, places that were very lush land. The only reason they decided eventually to make it in Palestine is because they needed the support of the world. And so again, there's so many different facets, depending what level of Zionism you look at, what group of Zionists. But these guys kept on saying, hey, you know why we need a land? Because where's God to protect us? Where was he by Hitler? Where was he? Well, they started before Hitler. Where was he by all the trials and tribulations of Jews? By the Dreyfus. Theodor Herzl said, where was he by the Dreyfus trial? You see, Jews suffered. Captain Dreyfus was a French captain who was accused of espionage. If you know, it's a very famous case, Captain Dreyfus. And they gave him a very long sentence. And one of the reporters wrote about, decided to study this case. And he came along and he said, you know, they picked Dreyfus and they accused him of espionage because it was somebody else, but he's a Jew. And all of a sudden the issue became, it was in the papers, and a lot of anti-Semitism really surfaced. And it was a very, very dirty fight in France. They eventually exonerated Captain Dreyfus, and it turned out it was somebody else who threw the blame on him because he was a Jew. But really, you saw in the judicial system was blatant anti-Semitism. Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, came along and said, you see, we assimilated, we're not religious, he said, and you see it didn't work, so we have to make a homeland. So a Jew turned to him, other religious Jews turned to him, and they said, but you're not allowed to do this. What does he know about religion? In fact, he proudly announced that he's not circumcising his son. Jews gave their lives. This is part of the Jewish, our covenant with God, that we have to circumcise our sons. And he announced in the newspapers that he's not circumcising the son. He never did. He had one son, his name was Hans. He never circumcised him. He detested religion. So he really just wanted a lush land for convenience sake that should have the Jews together, so they shouldn't have to worry about anti-Semitism. But he wanted to really throw away the yoke of Judaism. But his friends told him, you have to turn to Palestine and use Judaism, because or else we won't have enough money, enough support. So they went to Palestine, and all of a sudden some of their messengers grew beards, and they started giving themselves the name Eschalto de Geula, the beginning of redemption. That's what they call themselves, the beginning of it. And they have music in New York, I don't know, other places, in their advertisements. You hear this emotional music go, and it says, oh, we've 2,000 years we were in exile, and now we have back the land that God gave to us. They know that the world does not know the truth of the Torah teaching, so they can use this as a ploy, as a tool to get the support, the emotions of the non-religious Jews, the ignorant, most Jews who are ignorant of their religion, even the marginally religious Jews, and of course of the evangelistic Christians and others who support, because some of them with really, most of them, with well-meaning. They feel the suffering of Jews, they pity them, and they know in the Bible it says it's the land, God gave the Holy Land to the Jews, so they support the Zionists because they believe it's true. They're giving them land. But they know better. The Zionists knew. They knew they're just hypocrites. They knew they're just dressing and using God's name because they scorn the religion. They detest it. Jabotinsky, there was the two fathers of the Zionist movements. There was the Haganah and the Irgun. Begin, a prime minister, was a student of Jabotinsky. So there was two schools, one very terroristic. The other, both of them, the Haganah, and which turned into the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, was from Ben Gurion. Both of them, they're good competition for what terrorism is. But more fanatical maybe was Jabotinsky, they said, and he wrote in 1919, well before the state was created. He wrote in a newspaper called Chadosh Haaretz. The Chadosh Haaretz means the news of the land, and he wrote like this. I'm quoting: "In the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile, and they refuse to shave off their beards and payas and earlocks, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote." Ben Gurion didn't want to be left back in this, and messages, and I will quote him also in a second. Here you go. The diaspora means that we were spread through exile, is ending, and everyone is coming. They're coming back, and according to his theory, everybody is coming. This still does not make a nation, but a mixed multitude and dust of man. Because he detested so much Cyril, it's a dust of man, without the language and education, without roots. To change dust of man to a cultured nation is not an easy job. In other words, they were looking to uproot the Jew from his connection to God and to make him into a proud nationalist, a supporter of this powerful army. We are strong, we're not going to bow our heads again, never again. Maybe you heard the statements of the JDL, Jewish Defense, never again, we're going to show you. Not God. God didn't help us, God forbid. So it's rooted, this whole country is rooted in heresy, that it's not God, It's not God who helps us, it's our guns, our Uzis, our phantom fighters. And ironically, this is the root of Zionism. And it's an hypocrisy because these guys aren't religious, they don't want religion, yet they wave the Star of David. Who was David? He wrote the Psalms, he was a holy man. They call themselves Yisroel. Jacob's name was Yisroel. So how dare they? They're using religious people. They desecrate the Sabbath. In fact, they'll arrest anybody who demonstrates, and they arrest and brutally beat my colleagues for demonstrating when they desecrate the Sabbath. We desecrate them we demonstrate because of what they're doing to the Arabs. We demonstrate because they're beating, because every crime they're doing to the Palestinians. We demonstrate because of the existence of the state, and we don't have arms. Nobody accuses us of having guns, and they brutally beat our people. But they also beat us because we stand out there on the Sabbath because the cars fly through the streets on the Sabbath and they don't want to close the streets in the Jewish neighborhoods. We say, how dare you? God warned us. I created the world in 6 days. The seventh day I rested. You ought to keep. It's one of the 10 commandments. How dare you take a land where the horn blown? In the time when it was under the Turks, when it was under the British, there was a horn blown before the Sabbath and everything became silent. There was a man who would go around from store to store and every single store closed before Sabbath. But now, how dare you Orthodox Jew tell us what to do? We are a democracy. We are the new Judaism. Yet, to you they turn and they say, God gave us the land. How dare you start up with God? They have a license. They have a license to be Jews because they're the protectors of Jews. They're protecting us from the Arabs. How dare they? But this is what they're doing. It's a farce. Ironically, in the Torah it states that we are forbidden to have one piece, since we were sent into exile, to have 1 inch of sovereignty, even if it wouldn't be inhabited. And certainly not by stealing and killing. These are expressly forbidden. So in one fell swoop, when they decided to go to Palestine, they've breached. Their concept, their ideology was heresy. But here they're breaching every law. We're not allowed to make a state. We're not allowed to kill and steal. And above all, when we have to show gratitude to do good done to us. It's a requirement of the Torah. The Arab lands gave us a home. The Palestinians gave us a home. How dare they turn around and tell the world that these are evil people, that you shouldn't allow them in the United States? How dare you say that? These are the people who gave you a safe haven when you were being persecuted in Europe. Our hearts cry. Jews around the world who are true to religion, our children grow up with this. They hear, we cry, we are humiliated because this is being done in our name. And people think the more religious you are, obviously, then you will observe the Torah more. So the more you support the state of Israel. They make cartoons when they want to show a Zionist of a Jew who dresses like me. And sometimes they take my picture to go on the internet. They want to show a Zionist. So they take a picture of a Jew. They'll take my picture because it's out there. I've had it more than once. It's tragic because it's nothing. It's not based on reality. Judaism and Zionism are miles apart. They are diametric opposites. Judaism is subservience to God. Zionism is heresy. They call it democracy. It's not that either. It's supposedly democracy. Democracy for anybody who goes along with their view. But if you happen to be a Palestinian or an Orthodox Jew, then, oh no, then you're the worm that you're allowed to. Everybody shoots mosquitoes out of the air, right? We're in the way. And being that they don't have a moral ruler, something to fear by doing evil, we have a Torah. They don't have that. So they're ready to sacrifice on the altar of Zionism anything that impedes their goal of having a free country. So we are out there to tell you that this concept of Zionism in every facet is not only, it's not Judaism, it's criminal. They have no right to exist, and they can't base it because we have a contract, we have a lease. They say we bought the land, we got it from God. That lease is false. God said to the Jews, it's God's land. You are to remain there till as long as you were on this high level of holiness. But when every prophecy, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, speaks about how the Jews were warned by God that being due to our sins, if you're not remaining on that high level, you will be driven from the land. And this happened with the destruction of the temple. Any religious Jew, ask them to show the prayer book. I'm sure it's translated into Spanish. And you look there and you'll see, we say on our holiday prayers, because of our sins we were driven from the land. Not because the Romans were strong, the Greeks were strong. When God wanted us to go into the land, the walls of Jericho sunk. It was a miracle. It wasn't because of our physical prowess, and we were driven from the land, not because of our physical lacking, because we were weak. When God willed it, we went there. When God willed it, we had to leave. And we are dispersed amongst the nations, and we happily, although it may hurt, we accept this God's decree. It's medicine, it's bitter medicine, we accept it. It's a purpose. God wants us, because God is almighty and everything compassionate, He wants us dispersed amongst the nations, actually, ideally, to teach people how to serve God. Not to make them become Jews, but how to serve God. Because, as I say, we are instructed in our law books, it's forbidden. We are to discourage people, because if anybody could become Jewish, but if you become Jewish and you don't uphold all the laws of the Torah, you're a sinner. But if you're non-Jewish, and you keep the 7 commandments of God, you will inherit the world to come. So we are just to be a light unto the nations and befriend and be good with our neighbors. And we have to emulate God. Just as God is compassionate, you have to be compassionate. The rabbis, from day one, stood up around the world. We have a book called The Rabbis Speak Out. It's a 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zion. It's not on our site. NKUSA, www.nkusa.org. It doesn't. You can download it, I believe. This historic documents where with God's help, we write the documents of the rabbis, of the Zionists themselves. It's all on our site. Anybody can see it. You can see on our site. You can download it, and you can see the tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of Jews demonstrating and gathering in the Holy Land. This is when the chief rabbi passed away in 2013, and we took up a new chief rabbi. Our demonstrations are all like this. Hundreds of thousands of Jews, sometimes tens of thousands, and sometimes we stand in front of the United Nations, 5, 2, 1, and this is what our rabbis did in Jerusalem. We demonstrate constantly. We have, not only in Jerusalem, where we have, thank God, literally hundreds of thousands of religious Jews who will never accept this Zionism because they're Jews. Because they're Jews, they cannot accept it. But we have around the world, invariably, wherever there's a very religious community. In New York, we live right across from Manhattan, Williamsburg, the largest concentration of religious community. There's more, there's other communities, but there, you go, there's not one Israeli flag. It's the largest concentration of religious Jews. Go to Manhattan, cross over, right across, you'll see it. Go to London, Stamford Hills. There's not an Israeli flag, because it has to be. If you're religious, you're truly religious to the Torah, you're not making compromises like many, even these marginally religious communities around the world, then you cannot sustenance Zionism. Your stomach is not made of iron. You can't be strong enough, if you're Jewish, to be able to sleep at night and accept an occupation, oppression of people, the desecration and the breach of all the laws of the Torah. In Manhattan, we have many times through the year, people go over from the Jewish communities around, and even some from Manhattan itself, tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating right across from the Israeli embassy in front of the United Nations. We have here in Washington, D.C., Netanyahu went to visit President Obama, tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating. Mind you, the heat, this demonstration that is shown was around 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Celsius, forgive me, I don't know, but people were fainting. What? 42, 43, it says, people were fainting. They kept on having to call ambulances, but we stood there for hours to voice our opposition that Netanyahu is coming supposedly in the name of Jews. No, he's not. They don't represent Judaism. He keeps on insisting that it's a Jewish state, it's religion. We want you to be clear and careful, not when you want to speak your sorrow, your pain. Don't say those Jews are the Jewish state, because what is happening is you're giving fodder. I mean, I will say many times, the Jews, they call it the Jewish state. I can also fall into the same, mistake. But the fact is, Zionism insists, when they made the Camp David Accords, every one of the problems, they insist on calling it, calling it a Jewish state, not a Zionist. They wanted to even make a law, they wanted to pass that it's a Jewish state, not a Zionist state, because they know that is their greatest armor against being attacked. Because whenever you say the Jewish state, it's tinted, it sounds like you're an anti-Semite. And it's not a Jewish state. The chief rabbis of Palestine, and we have many. It's in the documents of the United Nations. When the United Nations came and they wanted to ratify the state of Israel, the chief rabbi stood up, and they went to meet with the United Nations delegation. And this is what we furthermore wish. And this is what he wrote and spoke to them. It's in their own documents, in the United Nations documents. We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was the most religious, one of the greatest, our greatest holy men. And this is what he said: we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Why? Doesn't he want a Jewish state? And this was before all the problems that came out. They weren't prophets. They didn't know that what's going to happen in 48 and 56, and they thought maybe the United Nations will give them, and they'll be able to have it hunky-dory, peaceful, everything fine. Before that, they said, no, we don't want this because it's not a Jewish state. They were ignored because Chaim Weizmann, all these Zionists, they were close. They had the ears of the heads of the Western, and they were able to create the state. But we Jews stood up, and many of our rabbis were assassinated, brutally beaten. Again, hundreds of thousands more would be demonstrating. In Chile, I'm sure there's plenty of Jews who would stand up and speak out. But they're targeted. In many of our students who live around the world, in the United States and many countries, in France, they tell us they're afraid to speak up. In Argentina, we have a beautiful Jewish community, but they're afraid to speak out because of the intimidation, the brutal attacks of Zionists. I could go on the media attacks of newspapers. Politicians lose their jobs if they speak up. This is a fact. AIPAC, not that they're so big, but they're efficient, unfortunately. They have media watch. But the truth is, as I say, the religious community stands in solidarity, feels your suffering, and we know one thing. In truth, the greatest power on the universe was, is, and will always be the Almighty. We'll never forget that. And the Almighty ultimately will end the state, because it says, why are you rebelling against me? You will not be successful. And you even see the state illogically is not successful, because in the years that passed, why did all the people, I'm ending in 2 minutes, baby. Why do you find people living in refugee camps? It's illogical. So many people should have gone to Canada. The Palestinian people, I go to many universities, they're brilliant, they're gifted. Why do you see they're living in squalor in refugee camps throughout the world? Grandchildren already. Of course, people don't let them, that I know, but still in all, it defies logic that after so long, they shouldn't have assimilated, really melted into societies around the world. We believe it's because God does not let this state of Israel come to its dream, because it can't be. It can never be a successful land. It's a rebellion against God. And it will end. It ultimately will end. And just like USSR, you were intimidated. It was so powerful. And people lost hope. USSR didn't let prayer. They didn't let religion. It disappeared overnight peacefully. We urge everybody, the power, the ultimate power is God. We have to pray to God for the speedy and peaceful, God help, this total dismantlement of this impediment to peace, the Zionist state of Israel. It's the remedy. If everybody knows what the sickness is not the Hamas, Hezbollah. It's not the Palestinians, this group or that group. The root is because a foreign object was put into an eye, and the eye keeps on blinking. Remove this foreign object, and the eye with all the different colors and parts will be good. Jews, Muslims, and Christians live together. You threw in a piece of sand into the eye. You put in Zionism, a foreign object. Remove the foreign object and there'll be peace. we can embrace each other and serve God in harmony once again. That is the true solution. We can pray to God. God is capable to bring this end. At the same time, I hope I gave you with God's help, and I urge you to look further into the study of this subject, that you should have enough, give you like a courage that you, when you're accused of anti-Semitism, you should say, excuse me, if anybody's anti-Semitic, it's Zionism, because Jews were living in every Arab land. Jews were living in France wearing the yarmulke, wearing the coverings of the head, and they weren't afraid. What happened? Since Zionism came, that's when we are afraid to live in societies that we were able to live in. So obviously, it's the cause of bloodshed is, and in time in history, you won't find a peaceful time of history that there's so much bloodshed as since the state of Israel. So this insurance policy is only the cause of Palestinian and Jewish bloodshed. They are the exacerbators of anti-Semitism. Your hands are covered in blood. Remove this impediment and we will have peace. So don't be intimidated. Pray to God. At the same time, please speak up for the people of Palestine. Stand up for them. Every day that goes by is another carbon, another sacrifice to Zionism, to this terrible Nakba tragedy, because people are emotionally scarred. Every family is scarred, whether they're living in Palestine or out. In every refugee camp that people don't even know the names, they've forgotten about them. We must stand up and urge, and just like by South Africa, any child you ask today, could you have a racist state like South Africa the way it was, or blacks sitting in the back of the bus like in the United States? They'll say it's crazy. They won't believe that George Washington and our distinguished and beautiful country that they speak about, the Bill of Rights, that they allowed this to happen for so many years. What changed it? Civil rights groups, plain Jack and Jane, plain people like us, went up and kept on badgering and talking and not letting the politicians feel comfortable. That eventually caused that one of the nations in the United Nations that was sitting there as a distinguished nation, while Nelson Mandela was rotting in prison and called a terrorist, they were the ones able to do this. We pray to God. God will ultimately do it, but we have to stand up and keep on, and God help we should be successful with the free and Palestine. So we as Jews, I'm selfish, we can show our gratitude to the Palestinian people, say, here's your homeland, here's your land, and we are proud, we are thankful we can return it to you, and we hope to live together and serve God in harmony again. God will sanctify His name. Ultimately, we pray for the day when God will reveal His glory throughout the world, where all humanity will believe in the one God. We will all serve Him in harmony soon in our days. Thank you.